Hi there, everybody, boys and girls, men, women, whatever else. I guess I shouldn't even get into that whole
just weightlifters,
gender assignment thing.
Coaches.
Sticky topic these days. Weightlifters, athletes of all kinds who are interested in weightlifting.
Coaches.
Pretty much everybody. We welcome you all. Greg Everett, Ursula Garza. Forgot our names for a moment there. I don't even remember how to introduce this thing anymore. Was there something you wanted to talk about before we get to questions? I feel vaguely like 20 minutes ago in our conversation you mentioned that.
No.
No. Okay.
No,
okay.
I just got back. Look, I let my dog in. He starts barking. Asshole. I just got back in from Switzerland last night, so I'm semi-comatose right now. And I was at the second, and I suppose the annual, if it's been two so far.
Yes.
I remember Women in Sports Leadership Conference. It was hosted by the International Olympic Committee and a group called ASOEF, which is Association of Summer Olympic International Federations. So I technically went as an IWF, or International Weightlifting Federation representative or delegate, along with Maura Lassen from Canada. And it was interesting. I learned some things. I learned some things about myself and my leadership style, which were not a surprise.
Well, wait, if they weren't a surprise, then is that learning things?
No.
Doesn't that imply that you already knew them?
Yeah, I reaffirmed what I kind of knew about my leadership style. And it's interesting maybe for others because I'm not what people would think I would be in terms of my leadership style. And it's because I subscribe to a philosophy called servant leadership, which is, very popular in education. And of course, I've spent all my life in education at a college as a professor or working in administration. So that wasn't a big shock. There were some things that I totally agree with that, women need a little bit stronger representation or amongst the International Olympic movement. I'm not sure that I agree totally on the ways to get there, but that's another issue. That's a issue for politics and governance to solve, and how we get there. I did agree with some of the mantras like merit over just putting women in because they're women. Yet they are proposing quotas, but I'm not sure that those two necessarily jive all the time. And so that was a little confusing, maybe. I think, Greg, when we were talking about this, you said it best. It should be equal opportunity.
It should be equal opportunity, not guaranteed representation. Yeah.
Guaranteed equal
representation. You want, well, not you. I think it's pretty simple. You create the opportunities for women, men equally. If you make a job 100% merit based, that takes care of the quality, which should be the absolute number one focus. And then you do things like encourage women to take part in it in various ways rather than forcing quotas on it, which you made the perfect point. Okay, if we force 3 or 4 women's spots, then what if you only have 2 women who are legitimately qualified? Then all of a sudden you have 1 or 2 women who are not qualified, who you're forcing into a position of importance over someone else who is more qualified, perhaps more motivated and enthusiastic and more experienced. It makes no sense. It hurts everybody.
That's right. And that person, would be able, if it's merit based for, truly, then that person has the ability. You're losing somebody who has the ability to make major contributions because they're not the right gender. I mean, I feel like, and I know in my whatever ascent or change over time, because I see my progress more as just evolution. I put my years in as an elite athlete. I put my years in as an elite coach. I wasn't given anything at any level. I was certainly supported by both men and women. And then, in terms of me being on the board, I really didn't make it to chair until almost my last term. It was the second half of my second term that I think was being considered as chair of the board. And so I feel like I've always done my due diligence and work before I've expected some step. And I think it's why I feel like I have broad support from our membership base.
Broad support.
Yeah. And respect from both the men and women that I consider my colleagues. And I would hate for anyone to look at me and say, oh, they just gave that to her because she's a woman.
Yeah.
That would for me delegitimize everything.
Well, it does.
I don't think any woman wants to feel that way.
No, it does a disservice to the women you're trying to empower by giving them something they haven't earned. In the same way it would do the same thing to a guy if you gave him a job he didn't earn just because he owns a dick. Mm-hmm. So there.
Yeah, we should have vagina spots in.
We're taking care of basically every social problem there is right now here on this podcast.
Yeah, we're gonna end all war. So the problem that they run into, and our president, Dr. Ayan, made some astute comments that I think, I'm not going to say fall on deaf ears, but maybe fall on unwelcoming ears, in pointing out a real problem for the international federations and for some national federations, is that the women in the sport haven't been prevalent enough, long enough to develop female leaders out of those countries. And so because a lot of the debate was about why doesn't the IOC and their international federations just mandate to all these national federations that to have a seat at the table internationally, they have to have representation in their national federations. So they're mandating this kind of centralized authority be utilized to force all of these national federations and then international federations to have so many seats of women, when in fact what we're talking about is the problem. I mean, unfortunately, there are some sports, particularly like weightlifting, right, male-dominated sports, where culturally very few women are even allowed to participate. And so to then tell those countries, and it could be religious, it could be cultural, but to go in and try to mandate what would be tantamount to a cultural change seems and will seem like the international federations are overstepping into that kind of sovereign piece of how the national federations run. Now, do I think that women should be involved at all these levels? Of course. But it has to be, the door does have to open. And I think that if anything, the mandate should be that they work in a hopefully effective way to open the door for more women to develop. And then once you've done that, you can consider saying, okay, these women that have developed, can we open up seats for them along the way? Once the thing is, you're competing with men who have 20 and 30 years of experience in the sport, and they're just at the front end. And I'm not saying that you have to have 20 or 30 years to be instrumental in affecting progress and change, but certainly you need some time in the sport. And also there are things like people who have professions that naturally will add to the sport, like a medical background or a background in law. Those types of women who have those professional jobs, professional roles, are always a benefit because they bring some perspective and outside information that is beneficial to the organization on the whole. So you might want to look at trying to persuade women in certain, or with a sports psychology background, right? Women who have special skills, and bring those women in, where you're not expecting them necessarily to add to the technical portions of the sport, but into collateral aspects that are also important and can be utilized to the benefit of a whole federation. In any case, there were some things that were kind of eye-opening. It created a little bit of, for me, like some internal struggle into how I see things and how things are being proposed to be done. And I could see that there were other women in the room that probably were more like me in terms of they had really, really put in their time in different areas and evolved in their sports career into the position they were in, and were struggling a little bit with, exactly how do we get it done. And the 2020 mantra is that by 2020 there are 30% female representation in all the sports on their executive boards. And this is, in some cases, many, many sports who had already achieved this or more. And then you have sports who have not, but are progressing towards it. And then you have some sports that have not made any move to that, but it's happened organically, or some that it's not happening at all. So it was interesting. It was interesting. It was 3 days of all sorts of things. And some I, fervently agreed with, and some I did not. So I'll just leave it at that.
Well,
I'm glad I went. Switzerland's beautiful. I learned I can't afford to move there even if I wanted to. And I wish I would have stayed more than just 3 days in the hotel, which is what is normal on all of these trips that I go on, is travel for 2 days, do meetings for 2 or 3 days, and then go back home. So you see very little. But we did go to the IOC museum, Olympic Museum, but we did not have a chance to actually walk around it. We just had dinner and lunch and listened to panel discussions. So I was really impressed with our IWF president, because his comments were all rooted more in reality than they were in saying what people wanted to hear. And I felt like in that way, although some of the things that he said did not really sit well with some women, they were reality. And I think that maybe this dose of reality, instead of this idea that everything's going to happen in a quick way if we just push real hard, is better for us. I think sometimes it's the medicine you need to understand that we have to do things in a really progressive way, and to be patient. You have to be patient and not expect to be the beneficiary of whatever changes come along. You fight for change, not so that you can benefit from the change. And this was one of the things I walked away with, realizing that a lot of women fight for change so that they're the beneficiaries of that change. And to me, that is not fighting for change. That is fighting just for yourself. And my fight for women is about all the women, not for me. I don't expect to be the beneficiary of the change that I push for.
I expect to be the beneficiary of the change you push for.
Okay. Well, you can be. But if I do it just for me, I'm not doing it for the right reasons. If I'm doing it for Greg, it's obviously the right reason.
Well, yeah, because I'm not you.
And I'll tell you something. And Greg, you can blush if you want, or you can say some negative remark and insult me. I don't care either way.
Now I'm really curious what you're going to say. How would I either blush or insult you?
Because I have that ability.
Oh, okay.
I got to tell you sometime about me making Nat Aaron blush. I can make Nat Aaron blush on demand. Anyway,
I don't feel like that would be that hard.
Talk about feeling powerful.
Okay.
This podcast, everybody knows that I forced Greg to do it. Everybody knows it. And I
not quite at gunpoint, but similar.
Yeah, it wasn't very far. He was driving, and I could have turned the wheel.
In Texas, where no one will come to help you.
Yeah, it would have been in Texas, and I would have been like, it's his fault, and everybody would believe me. Yeah. I did, push Greg to do this because, number one, I knew that Greg had a lot of valuable information. He's always been the person that when I talk to about weightlifting is the best at explaining and describing. And of course, I agree with him 99% of the time, so that makes it better too. describing and explaining what I think. And so I was always like, yes. Every time I'd hear him, even if it was just, to me, it's rewording one of my thoughts.
I'm in your head.
You're in my head. And I just thought that was, besides that, we can be incredibly funny together, but y'all really don't get that benefit because we're much funnier when don't have any intent of editing what we say than we are when we're on the air and we try to control ourselves a little bit.
You have no idea how much.
Yeah, no, it's a lot. And so I thought, like, this is something that I love hearing him explain things. So if I love hearing him explain things, I would assume, like, because I'm, a coach and an athlete, and especially since he's right, that everybody should be able to hear, that everybody should be able to hear what he's saying. And I felt a little selfish being the beneficiary of this just because I get to sit next to him and I'm his friend, pretty much thanks to his wife, Amy. This is how I end up meeting really some of the best men in our sport is through their wives, both athletes and coaches. And so I thought this is something that everybody should hear. Okay, that's my intent. Greg's intent. And Greg can disagree because I don't care what he thinks about this. Greg's intent was to support me. Greg didn't do this on his own. He could have done this on his own at any point in time with somebody else. He could have got Matt Foreman, who's even funnier than I am by far. Of course, some of those stories can't make it to the air either.
I was going to say, we couldn't use 99% of his stories.
Right, Matt's But I mean, he could have used Matt. He could have had practically any Danny Camargo. He could have had practically anybody who's already fairly well known in the sport as a coach. He could have grabbed an athlete. He could have, if he wanted to do this on his own to promote himself and the sport of weightlifting with himself, number one, then he could have gotten anybody. He didn't have to wait for me to come beg him to do it. Or convince him. It was a little close to, I'm like, come on. We should do it. It'll be fun. It'll be great. It's been miserable, but we love it in a way. We just have a hard time with our schedules. But other than that, I think we both enjoy it once we get going.
It's like hitting yourself in the face with a hammer. I enjoy it once I stop.
But he did it. He bangs himself on the hammer on a weekly basis because he knew that I didn't have the audience he did, but I had experience and had attained high levels in our sport because I had been working so hard and so long. So the truth is, this podcast on Greg's side was, I think, firstly, to help me. Second, to help the rest of y'all. He thought my name should be out there and that I should have the audience that he has worked long and hard to attain. And he was willing to hand and share that with me. That is a man supporting a woman in earnest. And there are many men who will do it, but they don't really number the amount that they should. And it's men like that will help promote women in this sport and will help them attain higher levels. So what we really need to do in changing the number of women that are high levels in this sport is to have other men recognize the valuable women in the sport and help promote them and to sponsor them so that they can reach the levels. And we have the number then to be able to fulfill whatever quotas get put on us with experienced and women who bring value, who have merit and bring value to the table.
Yeah, and not in a patronizing way. Like, oh, come on, sweetie, come on board, I'll help you out. Like you said, you've earned everything you have, the accolades you have, and I think they were just under-recognized and underappreciated because you were busy actually, being a weightlifter, being a weightlifting coach versus being a self-promoter, which I've had to dip my toes into that whole world just so I could pay bills and not have a normal person's job like you still do. Although some days I question that decision.
It's not bad.
it can be not bad. It can be awful. But yes, I would agree with you for the most part.
Anyways, most people don't. People know that I pushed you into doing this. I had my reasons, and Greg had his, and they were actually different reasons. And I think a lot of women would be maybe surprised to know that was the real motivation behind Greg's decision, because at this point he doesn't really need this podcast.
No, I need this podcast like I need higher cholesterol and blood pressure. They don't make numbers that high.
And I love this podcast because it means I get to talk to Greg regularly. And I'm not talking about during the podcast. I'm talking about before the podcast.
Yeah, this part's not as fun.
This part becomes collateral to the initial conversations.
All right. All
right. So
if we're done telling the world how amazing I am. Are we actually recording?
Of course. Because sometimes I think we're recording, and then Greg's like, "Okay, let's get going." I'm like, "Well, shit."
I'll have to spontaneously repeat that entire thing authentically.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's help somebody besides Ursula. Let's help a man, Zachary. Well, I guess that's presumptuous of me. Maybe it is a woman named Zachary. You what?
I think Morgan can go either way.
Morgan can go either way.
That's next.
All right. Zachary asks, could you please touch on the use of power movements in programming? Are they for rest, or are they for pulling strength, or are they just used to frustrate people? Zachary, this is a good question, but I also chose it probably 70% just because it was funny.
Yeah. Are they just used to frustrate people? Yes.
It's sometimes kind of, yes. Used for our coaching amusement. No, that's not true. Actually, my favorite power snatch story is, speaking of my wife, Amy, and both Mike Bergner, who was both of our coach, every once in a while he would try power snatches with her, and he would watch her do a few of them and just be like, "Oh, we're not going to do power snatches anymore."
It's just not painful.
So it was more frustrating for him than anybody else. So it's not just you who's frustrating. Ursula, what are your thoughts on this? This is gonna be a pro woman episode. You get to take the lead on everything.
Great, I don't want to.
I'm just kidding. That's exactly the kind of patronizing bullshit I'm talking about.
Yeah, I'll hand the ball back so fast.
Go ahead, sweetie.
Shut up. Hon.
Come on, pumpkin. Oh, that's cute that you have an opinion. Go make me a sandwich.
You're going to get popped in the face by someone.
I know. Wasn't it just International Women's Day the other day, too?
Yeah, yes, the 8th. Yes, it was. Good job, sweetie.
I'm sorry.
They can be for rest. So to his question, are they for rest? They can be, because you're going to lower the intensity. Obviously, you can't power snatch as much as you can. Of course, if you keep it high, you can make, if you say power snatch up to 83 or 85%, that's probably their max. So that's like the highest intensity you could use. But you can use them for rest, so that you're really resting the overhead squat portion of it. Pulling strength, I would say no, because they're a lower percentage of your full lift. Or they used to frustrate people. Probably not, but they could be frustrating. I use power snatches specifically to teach people how to find the bar in space. So they should be, and to adjust their force, so that they know with one weight, if they drive through the ground a certain amount and jump a certain amount, like in terms of intensity, that the bar gets to a certain height, so that they learn how to judge the application of force, and then they can learn eventually how to adjust that. So that's one of the reasons I use them, so that they can meet the bar and they learn how to adjust applied force to the bar. And of course, in that receiving concept, they learn how to find the bar in space and meet it quickly and sharply. I often make people do these movements and hold the receiving position, so that as soon as they turn over, there is no movement. They just freeze. And that's so that they can punch the bar hard and fast, and they only sit to the required position. So for people who continually press out a little bit when the weights get heavier, they need to learn how to drop instead of pressing up, so that they're pressing up as they're sitting. And so to work on the coordination of that, I'll use power snatches. otherwise, like in terms of programming them, if I'm trying to start giving their legs some rest, then we'll start putting in some power movements. And then lastly, speed. And speed phases or pre-comp phases, you're usually trying to restore speed because the athlete has worked through a really high volume conditioning phase already. They've already increased their intensities, and there would be some layover at the beginning of that with still high volume. And then you start pulling out, once you start pulling out volume, they're able to lift higher percentages of their lifts more often. But in that final phase, you need to try to bring speed back. And in bringing speed back, you start to then, I at least, will start alternating full movements with power movements for rest to restore speed.
Yeah, I concur.
Okay, next question.
Well, I do have a couple things to add, though.
Okay, go ahead, sweetie.
Oh, shit. Okay, I'm so distracted. So, yeah, everything that she was just saying, using for reduced load while still practicing that same essential movement. I would, learning where the bar is in space in the body, I would just expand on that and say specifically, learning how to turn the bar over and meet it properly. In other words, and this to me, I think is probably more important with the clean, using power cleans, because with the clean in particular, because most of the time, more often a lifter will kind of open the grip during the turnover of the clean more so than they will in the snatch, even if they release the hook grip. You're going to see a lot of disconnection. You'll see people really dropping out from under the bar into too deep of a squat, where the bar is 8 inches above their shoulders and then falling down onto them. And so working power cleans can kind of help them practice, staying connected to the bar, meeting the bar where it is, that the height that they've actually pulled it to, rather than just dropping indiscriminately into a deep squat. And then, of course, using power snatch plus snatch, power clean plus clean complexes to reinforce that very thing, or even, power plus hang is a good one. And essentially trying to secure the bar either overhead or on the shoulders at essentially the same height on the power and the full in that complex. In other words, realizing, okay, well, if I have 90 kilos on the bar and I pull it this high in one lift, I'm going to be able to pull it just as high on the next one, so I shouldn't fundamentally change what I'm doing with my body on the way under. Definitely speed in general, like overall, like Ursula was saying, and I do the same kind of thing, like in that last couple weeks of a cycle leading into a competition. I'll throw in powers, and I may not have even used them to that point, but a couple of days where the focus is, wanting to do the snatch and clean and jerk movements, but needing to keep the loading light and really help them focus on speed. Which, if let's say you do 60% of your best snatch as a snatch, you really have to cut down on, the speed that, the force you're putting into that extension and even the turnover to some extent, versus doing 60% of your best snatch as a power snatch. You can really, put the gas on and go essentially as fast as possible. So you get that same limited loading, but you're still working on speed. You're still working on the movement more similarly to how you would perform it as a full lift with more weight. For lifters with limited mobility in the squat, they can be really good substitutes as someone is, improving that mobility, or as part of a learning progression for someone who doesn't have that mobility. And, because you can essentially teach everything exactly the same. The snatch and the power snatch, or the clean and the power clean, should be the same fundamental movement, with the only difference being the height at which the bar is received and stopped. So if you have someone who can't squat all the way down, obviously you can teach them everything, but just say, hey, you're going to stop in a really high squat position. The one thing I would point out too, as far as being cautious about, is that you'll see a lot of people who dramatically change the way they move doing a power versus a full. And I think it's more common with a power snatch. You'll see people sitting the hips really far back and diving the chest forward in order to technically be in a power receiving height, with the hips above the knees. even though if they were in, the proper posture, it would be below a parallel squat. And so you end up kind of developing potentially some bad habits as far as your position and your movement under the bar in the full snatch. So if that's happening to you, you're probably using too much weight. It's not going to do you that much good if you have to totally change the way you're lifting. And with the power clean, it's less likely, but you'll still end up seeing people kind of jump the feet back out from under the bar and leaning forward, sitting back a little more. So just make sure that when you're performing the power snatch, power clean, as much as possible, you're adhering to those same, fundamental rules of the movement execution. Okay. Anything else?
No, I think we both said the same thing in different ways, and that was perfect.
So perfect. It was the yin and yang of answers, if you will. Okay. Morgan, he or she asks, at what point in an athlete slash coach's career do you feel it is appropriate to open a club and begin training other people on the lifts? Do you feel an athlete or coach should reach certain standards within the community, for example, the American Open or Nationals, or demonstrate a degree of understanding of the lifts? And he or she suggests like the level 1 and 2 USA Weightlifting certifications as demonstrating that degree of understanding of the lifts. Ursula?
Well, I just first off, with that explanation that you gave at the end, I think it was obvious to both of us that having 2 courses does not necessarily underscore one's understanding of the lifts. I mean, they're helpful. Of course, they're helpful in your understanding of the lifts, but it doesn't necessitate that you do actually understand the lifts because you've been through any course. Do I feel an athlete or coach should reach certain standards within the community in order to demonstrate that? I think that in some communities, the demand for someone to help others is higher, and you may need to venture into that area even if you don't feel yet you're fully equipped, because you may be more well-equipped than anybody else in your community. When I first started coaching, for example, I did not think that I necessarily had the skills to produce an elite athlete. I ended up producing an elite athlete because she had the skills to be an elite athlete, not because I had them.
Those are the best ones.
Yeah. That's the easy way to get your name on the map.
Thank you for being really good.
Yeah. And for a lot of people, that is how they get their name on the map. And so it does not necessarily follow that they are a good coach just because they have a good athlete. They could just have an outstanding athlete.
Yeah, everyone gets a fluke here and there.
Yeah. And for me, mine was like my first athlete. So that helps. At what point in an athlete coach's career do you feel it's appropriate to open a club and begin training other people on the lifts? I began training other people on the lifts far before I opened a club. I started coaching in 1993. I started my own team in 2013. Maybe I was a little on the delayed side, obviously, but it was a women's team that I coached from 93 under the mentorship of another coach, but he was in another state, so I was really working on my own. We sometimes call those first athletes guinea pigs. I think what's important is that you don't overstate your credentials or your ability to help them. I was very honest with all of my athletes in the beginning that I was still learning too. As they were learning, I was learning. The good thing is it takes a long time to learn that athlete. And because I had just a handful of athletes, I was able to help all of those athletes on an individual basis because there were so few of them. I think what ends up happening now is that people want to make a super club. And so even though they don't necessarily have the skills, what they may do is bring in another coach who is better than they are. I think that is a smart thing to do, because now you are learning from that more experienced coach while you develop your club. Some people don't have the ego to do that. They want to be the top dog. And I get that. Any chance that I had to bring in another coach to help me with coaching, I took it. And I would even hand off responsibility to that coach so that I could learn from them too. as I was still coaching. So I often shared coaching responsibilities with someone who was more experienced than I was. Over long periods of time, like 2 or 3 years at a time, I would have different coaches involved that were from different areas of the world that I could learn from. I think what we run into now is that this is a business. People are looking at this as a business. I think as a business owner, just do not overstate your credentials in order to get more business. You do yourself a disservice if you're unable to provide the actual expertise in coaching. And at some point, athletes, as loyal as they are to their coaches, will realize if their coach is somewhat of a fraud, because they will see other athletes around them with different other coaches excel, and if they don't, they'll turn around and say, well, you really didn't have the experience to do this. I think you just have to be very honest in doing whatever you're doing. I think you can open a club, but you need to be honest with the people that you're training, that you're still learning as well. I think people respect that more than anything. They're still willing to train with you because they want to learn too. And again, if there's not a lot of choices in their community, then there may be a demand. The other thing is you can look for, and you should look for, another coach to mentor you. What happens in that scenario is that you end up tying their credentials to you as you're learning under someone else. You can't be afraid that you're going to lose that lifter to this higher level coach. I firmly believe, I have lots and lots of coaches that I mentor around the city, or that I have, that they can tie their credentials to me. And if somebody comes to me and says, do you train this person, and are they good? I'm going to say, if I actually do mentor them, of course, because I try to teach my coaches that are under me, or that mentor under me, because they don't work for me, they completely run their own businesses, that I teach them everything I know, and that you can trust them. I'm also very careful as to who I mentor and who I will lend my credentials to, so that they can become good coaches. And I'm seeing, I have almost every single one of my coaches that I've mentored has their own athletes that are still their athletes. No matter what level they get to, they will always be their athletes, even if they bring them into my gym and I help them coach them. And that's the responsibility of the coaches that already have experience, is to make sure that you're helping develop new coaches, and to never try to take their athletes from them. Any athlete that lives on my team that is trained by another coach maintains that coach no matter what. And so that way you develop both coaches and athletes, and the coach is able to learn more quickly, and thereby assist their athlete in becoming the best that they can be. And I don't mind as their mentor to come in and give them advice on that athlete, but that always goes through the coach. And I think I've gotten off the question. But do I think an athlete or coach should reach certain standards within the community? I don't think that because you have an athlete at the AO or nationals that necessarily demonstrates your coaching abilities, because there is the chance that you just have that freak athlete. Now, if you can do this year after year after year, and that's how we judge each other, right, Greg?
Oh, yeah.
The ability to repeat that action, and to repeat it with athletes that don't necessarily have a lot of talent. So we should have athletes that are making it into the A session and the C session or B session, right?
Preferably the A session.
Because I prefer the A session too. And your hope is to eventually get them to the A session. But you should be developing athletes that maybe their potential isn't that high, but you make them fulfill their potential, whatever it is, whether it's A session or C session.
Yeah, good coach gets anybody better, not just people who are already good. But yeah, I agree wholeheartedly in Ursula's main point, which is you have to be honest and forthcoming about your abilities and your experience. And so there's the potential to misrepresent yourself as being more experienced and having greater credentials than you really do. But there's also the issue of the kind of the lie of omission. But point being, you need to be honest and forthcoming about your experience and your qualifications. and you need to not allow people to assume you have more experience and higher qualifications just by keeping your mouth shut and kind of creating that situation. So honest and forthcoming, not just honest when people ask you directly what your experience is. I would say that the other thing to consider, though, and Ursula, you kind of alluded to this, is your intentions. In other words, if your intention is to create a club because there's a demand for a place to train weightlifting, and there isn't adequate supply, and you're going to do that and just kind of help how you can, whether or not you're a fantastic coach yet or an accomplished lifter, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, that's it. Having a place to train in and of itself is doing quite a service for people in a lot of areas that they just don't have access to places to train. So that alone can be a great thing to do. Now, if you are any better or any more experienced than the people training, then you can provide them help. Holy shit, what is going on over there right
It's
now?
my phone going off. I can't help it.
It sounds like there's a riot in that office. So as long as you have some experience, you can help just about anybody. But again, be honest about it. If someone comes to you with a problem that you don't know how to fix or has a question you don't know how to answer, just be honest and say, I'm not really sure. Let me help you figure it out. And like Ursula was saying, talk to a coach that knows better. Help them find a source that will answer their question or will kind of resolve their problem, whatever the case is. The other thing I want to mention, though, is you kind of talked about, mentoring with another coach and how you kind of attach yourself to their credentials. But I think that's kind of a tricky area there, because I've seen a lot of people who try to basically they hijack. That's a good word for it. I was thinking of the term stolen valor, like pretending to be a soldier, basically. And saying, well, I'm buddies with this coach who's a senior international level coach and has sent all these people to, the world championships or the Olympics or whatever. And that in no way gives you those qualifications. It's a good sign that you're working with that coach, because presumably you're actually learning from them, although I've seen it not be the case.
Right.
But I've seen this happen, where you have a coach who's coached nobody, who has a club or a quote unquote team, who their bio is I work with so and so, or I co-host a podcast with so and so, and
that's how I just say I co-host a podcast with Greg, and then people come flocking.
Ursula, is Greg nice in real life?
Yes.
The answer is no. But yeah, so you need to be careful about that. Don't misrepresent your relationship with somebody like that. I mean, it's good to be proud of having a relationship with an established coach, but you need to be straightforward about what that actually means, and you need to understand what that means. It doesn't mean that you just absorb all of those experiences and understanding and credentials. It means that you are learning from them. You are not them. You're not talented Mr. Ripleying them.
But I think it's an added value if your coach has a mentor. I think it says something about them that you should respect. It's them admitting that they don't know everything and they have things to learn.
Yes.
I mean, that's what it's inherently saying. And that they're going to put the effort into learning more so that they can help you. Yeah. And I think that's where taking courses demonstrates something to your clients, because it says, I'm willing to not only take your money, but I'm willing to take that money and invest it so that I can give you something of more value.
Right. So I guess the bottom line would be, feel free to open a club and train people at any time, as long as you're doing so appropriately and your goal is to actually help them get better at weightlifting rather than just make
elevate
money.
Your status.
And be a self promoter. Yeah, you can make money. You can try to make money off of it. I say you can make money off it as if it's easy to do, but But that should not be your number one goal. If you want to go into business to make money, you need to find another business.
Yeah, weightlifting probably isn't it anyways.
Weightlifting and book publishing, it's like the two worst things. And of course, I fucking chose both of them. So, okay. I think we killed that one with many interruptions and weirdness. All right. Let's take care of Gary here, and then I think we'll have to wrap it up so I can go pass out. Gary asks, I have a pretty easily noticeable left to right asymmetries, probably some combination of very old injuries and structural differences. The biggest issue is my right leg is more flexible and less strong than my left. Is that like weaker? What type of exercises or modifications would you recommend to balance the asymmetry? I've tried to consciously push harder with my weaker leg during the squats, but I'm wondering if there is more I can do. Normally I hate questions like this, I gotta be honest. Because they kind of start getting into more of like a physical therapy, medical sort of realm, which is certainly outside our scope of practice.
Yeah. Greg, can I interrupt real quick?
Yeah.
Because then I'm going to go to sleep. No, I just want to say, like, just really quickly, because this is my contribution. It's going to be minimal, and it's going to seem like a cop-out. But this is what I really do. There's a woman in this city named Whitney Welsh. She is a professional physical therapist. She went to physical therapy school. She's a doctor. She can see and do, just like I've spent, 30 years in weightlifting, she has spent, a decade plus years helping athletes. She's an athlete. There's no way I'm going to know what she knows and being able to identify what's going on. I might say, oh, this or that, like I can see some things, but I'm not a physical therapist. And one of the things about representing yourself that we were just talking about is don't represent yourself as a physical therapist if you're not, right?
Yes.
And so I will very quickly tell someone, you know what, take the money that you were going to spend on training with me, and for the next month, use it to see a physical therapist, get a protocol of what we need to do, then you can come back to me and we can work on it. I don't want to guess. And, what we need to do. Some things, you can strengthen one area, stretch another area to try to create some balance if we know what it is. But I would rather get that protocol from a professional than to try to guess my way through it. One of the good things about having an experienced coach is that they can usually get you to a higher level or to a more accomplished level in a shorter period of time because they're not guessing their way through it. Well, the same with a physical therapist. You stay with a weightlifting coach to try to solve these problems, they're probably going to be feeling their way through it, making some mistakes, so misdiagnosing. I've even seen professionals misdiagnose, let's be honest. So you want to help them find the best physical therapist that can get them to a balanced state as quickly as possible. So I will very quickly say, I'm not the person you should be giving your money to. A physical therapist is. Go see that person and let's see what they give you, what their diagnosis is and prognosis, and how we can then solve that issue in here, if we can do it in here, and if we can't, solve it before you get here. Now, I'm not saying you have to be absolutely 100% symmetrical. Most lifters are not. But if it's something that is noticeable and could potentially cause injury, like a big twist in a movement, then I would say go to a physical therapist, get it figured out. And then it's not that you can't train alongside it, but make sure that you're get a proper assessment and a proper protocol that will actually solve the problem. Okay, if I start snoring, don't be mad.
I won't be mad. I'll be jealous. So yes, absolutely. Everything Ursula said is correct. You see a lot of people now with all this online access who want to circumvent, actually using medical professionals to solve medical problems. And to some extent that can be nice, especially when that sort of medical care is unaffordable, which it is for many weightlifters because they have no money. Some asymmetry is totally normal. What the worst thing you can do is take someone who is structurally a little bit asymmetrical and try to make them perfectly symmetrical. That'll cause more injuries than kind of just strengthening and reinforcing that natural asymmetry. But again, we're talking about a small degree. If, like Ursula said, your left hip is 4 inches higher than your right at the bottom of a squat and you're rotated 30 degrees, that's not a small degree of natural asymmetry. That needs to be corrected before you die. So as far as having a disparity in flexibility or mobility, well, that's easy. You just need to stretch the fucking tighter side more than the looser side. And I hate to sound flippant about it, but it really is that simple. You need to, just like you would do if my whole lower body is inflexible, well, you stretch it more. Okay, well, if only one half of your lower body is inflexible, you need to stretch that half more. And so, the thing with stretches to me is that it should be fairly intuitive what needs to be stretched. You don't need to know the name of the muscle. Most people who tell you what it is are probably full of shit anyway, in my opinion. And so you need to find the position in which you're tight, and then find a stretch that addresses that sensation of tightness. Don't make it more complicated than that, and then just hammer it. And ease up on the other side a little bit at the same time so that you can kind of meet in the middle somewhat. As far as strength disparity or asymmetries, that again, number one, start doing more unilateral work. So let's say you're squatting 3 days a week. If it's really bad, start squatting 1 day a week and take the other 2 days to do unilateral work. And again, do more volume on the weaker side. So whether this is lunging or split squats or step ups or whatever it is, let's say your left side is weaker. Maybe you do 4 sets on your left side and only 2 sets on your right side. And always start with that weaker side because you're going to have a little more energy, a little more focus, and then you can kind of use that to gauge how much you should do on the other side. If you start with your strong side and all of a sudden you knock out, 20 reps with 100 kilos, and you go to your left side and you can't do 3 reps with 50 kilos, well, you just reinforced that asymmetry. So, start with that weaker side and gauge your need that way. With regard to potential injury, like Ursula said, you need to be smart about this and make sure that you're not putting yourself in a position, so to speak, where you're inviting injury. So you may need to lighten your loads. You may need to stop certain exercises. You may need to modify certain exercises. For example, doing power variations instead of squat, whatever the case is, so that you're avoiding injuring yourself, but also, make sure that you're avoiding continuing to reinforce that problem or to strengthen that disparity. Again, you get good at what you practice. So if you practice sitting into a squat and rotating 30 degrees to the right, if you continue to do that, even if you're doing your unilateral work, you're hammering that mobility on the tighter side, you're just going to continue strengthening that problem. So be very conscious of that and try to spend as little time as possible reinforcing it. Take a step back, kind of reevaluate, and go from there. What do you think? Is that good enough?
That's awesome. What I do want to say,
it was so good that you stayed awake through the whole thing.
Yes, yeah, almost.
Riveting.
I just want to say this, and this sounds smart-ass and facetious, and that's kind of a play on words. Not everything is your fucking fascia. That's all I'm going to say, okay? Not everything needs to be scraped. That's all true. I'm going to say.
You know what?
I've seen people get scraped and do fascia release for fucking 6 months and have no change. If you're doing something for 6 months and the shit still hurts, guess what? It's not fucking working.
Remember in the olden days when we just called it stretching and it worked fine?
Yeah.
And that's sort of facetious, but also kind of fucking true.
Yeah, I made it through a whole career with a chiro and a coach, you know what I mean? Like just training. Yeah. I didn't have, but we stayed on top of it. I had weekly chiropractic sessions and that were proactive. I didn't wait for an injury to start addressing injuries.
Hard work and consistency. Shocking that it actually works in 99% of the cases.
I mean, if you're training really hard, having a medical professional, everybody does nutrition nowadays, but having a medical, and that's great. That's fantastic.
No, in most cases it's not. But
well, it depends. I guess who you have.
Yeah.
But somebody, with a good resume that has had results, just like you're looking for in a coach. And I'm saying results with athletes of the same sport. But having a medical professional that is available to address any perceived problems that are lasting more than a couple of weeks is important. You want to have access to that. So
Indeed.
You shouldn't just think, that's not necessary and that it doesn't ever come into play. For example, we didn't wait till she was developing asymmetries or issues. I had a little 12-year-old girl that I trained that I'm watching other coaches push their athletes as they're going through growth spurts. My athlete literally grew 2 inches, and this would seem unbelievable. All of the growth was in her fucking femur. All of it.
Oh, that's the worst.
So you can, poor little girl, she had pains in her knees, she had pains in her hips. And so we just stopped, we went to doing either power stuff off blocks, or she did no squatting. She couldn't. We did some like half step ups. We did things that wouldn't, create more pain. There was no reason for it. She was already in pain from just the growth spurt itself. And we had good feedback. So we had to step back, which meant by the time we got to our state meet, she hadn't done any squats. And so, that fine. She won the snatch and got second in the clean and jerk and overall. I was very happy with that. Because I responded to her body changing. And as a coach, that is always, you have to respond to what's going on with your athlete's body. And sometimes they won't tell you because they don't want to modify. So then you have to try to perceive any major changes in how they're moving. It's the importance of having a coach watching you day after day after day, because you can see changes in movement that they may not be telling you. Men are the worst in telling you that things hurt or because they just don't want to modify. But
that's not been my experience. I actually wrote a whole article about it.
No, I'm not saying they don't whine.
Okay.
So we're back on the same page.
Well, that article, though, I found hilarious that I got a couple of really nasty comments on it about my suggestion that in my experience, the women I coach are a hell of a lot tougher than the men. And there were like 2 or 3 guys on there whining and crying like fucking the stereotypical 6-year-old little girl. I was like, that's the way you choose to prove that men are tougher than women?
Men don't whine?
Shut up.
By whining?
Seriously, like just shut the fuck up. You're making it so much worse for yourself. Okay. That took a turn for the worse. Let's get out of here before I lose more of my audience. I'm going to get unfriended on Facebook because everyone's all butthurt about it.
Oh, that'll make room for new friends.
Yes. Perfect. A stranger is just a friend you haven't met yet.
Yeah.
All right. Or the person who's going to kill you and put you in their refrigerator.
Oh, Jesus.
All right. Guys, thank you for listening. Thank you for putting up with all of our stupid shit. And thank you for all of you who keep going and giving us good reviews on iTunes. We do appreciate it. As unenthusiastic as I may sound some days, I do like doing this. I do like hanging out with Ursula digitally. Not so much in person. And we're very happy that we can help a few people out here and there in all our spare time.
Yeah, the 1 hour.
And also, it's awesome that we're getting super rich off this podcast.
Yeah, just rolling in. Still waiting for my first check.
Man, yeah. Well, I'll let you know when I get mine. All right, guys. We'll talk to you in another 2 weeks. Be safe. Do good weightlifting. Help each other out. Don't be dickheads about anything. And yeah, I don't have any other good advice.
Other good general advice. Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
All right. See you guys.
See ya.
And girls, don't calm down.
Women, gentlemen, and ladies, or no, weightlifters. We decided non-gender specific weightlifters. However you identify yourself, we love you. Okay.
All right.
Bye.
Until next week.